Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where I, Joe Slepsky, the titular Joe in Joe on Joe, go through every episode of G.I. Joe Real American Hero. I go through every episode of the cartoon, and now we're doing every issue of the comic book, page by page, panel by panel, episode by episode. Today's another episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated, as we like to call it. Today we are covering G.I. Joe number 81. For those of you new to the show, welcome. For you old listeners, you old heads that have been with me for over 5 years, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys following me on social media at Joe on Joe Pod. That's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know if you're out there listening. Or you can go to my Patreon, Joe on Joe Pod, on Patreon, and so help support the show. We've got grunts, we've got vipers, and we've even got sponsors, all levels of participation. We've got some exclusive episodes of Joe on Joe Illustrated you can listen to there. And, as time permits, we'll add more and more. One of the things I want to do, and maybe I will make this a Patreon exclusive, I'm excited, guys. Something we never talk about. And I'm not a toy collector. I mean, I get them, you know what I mean? But I'm not. I know some of you listeners are experts, and that's, for me, I've always been more in love with the printed product. I come from the comics and the cartoon, but the comics were always a real passion for me. And so one of the things I love is getting all of the books and all the printed stuff and a lot of that world building that was being done back in the day. And one thing that recently crossed my desk here, and I need to dig into it and find how many more of these they did. The Marvel books, Mighty Marvel Storybook, The Spy Eye, with what looks like the early Joe team, just came in the mail, and I got a copy off eBay. It's in mint condition, and maybe we'll give that a read through over on Patreon. But I'm excited about it, and I want to find out more. I know it's a Google search away, but bear with me in that discovery sense of, wow, how many more? I know I could have looked it up before the show, but we're gonna get there. But that's exciting. So that's my big retro G.I. Joe purchase of the week. G.I. Joe The Spy Eye. If anyone out there in the audience has read that or has that, reach out, let me know. I'm excited to dig in. The Marvel books, Mighty Marvel Storybook, is smaller than I imagined. The picture on eBay, they didn't have anything for scale, so I was expecting a more fulsome, like, comic size adventure. And it's about the size of a digest. Actually, it looks the size of a digest, but it's not. It's new material and stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool. Now, also one thing in most shows call it, the corrections department, because, I don't have a corrections department. We don't do this a ton. Not that I don't make a lot of mistakes, everybody, because we all know I do. But friend of the show and friend Dave Amiot, who's the voice of Dr. Mindbender on our classic Cold Slither episode, he reached out after last episode and he said, let's see here. He said they identified the driver of the Rolling Thunder as Rumbler, but when the toy was released, the driver was called Armadillo, and then Rumbler was the name of the driver of the 87 radio-controlled vehicle, the Crossfire. And this was, we're talking about from issue 80. And Dave only remembers this because for him, the figure of the Armadillo was a little bland for him at the time. And the Rumbler, the guy named Rumbler, he was made from all the recycled parts of other Joes. So that's really cool. So again, this is getting into an era of some of the toys where I wasn't the expert on. So a lot of the stuff is new to my eyes. So I want to thank Dave for catching that. And that's a really cool catch. And now we know that a lot of this was being made in advance of the toys, or in concurrent with the release of the toys, because they wanted to prop up the toys. So this is one of those signs of changing, shifting winds as far as what character names would be, maybe what toys they were assigned to, things like that. So maybe Larry was given different information. This guy's going to be the driver of that vehicle, or his name's going to be this, or his name's going to be that. Those kinds of things. So that's pretty cool. It's a great catch. Thanks, Dave. He very often he'll shoot me a note and tell me how wrong I was. And he's never wrong. It's only how much It's only how much shame I want to carry with me that I'll bring into the table here. The other thing we got to discussing on that front is going to ask you this, world. Why didn't we have a fleet of radio-controlled G.I. Joe vehicles? G.I. Joe is the perfect scale for radio-controlled vehicles. Why were there not just literally a fleet of these? You know, why didn't we have a radio-controlled Ostriker, radio-controlled HISS tanks? I know the Mobat was... battery operated, but you know what I mean? Full on, partnered up with whoever the RC controller was and just make a bunch of shells that look like G.I. Joe and Cobra vehicles. Imagine a radio control Thunder Machine, right? A radio control Ostriker, a radio control Havoc, like stuff like, you see where I'm going. There should have been a fleet of these things. That would have been so cool. That would have been absolutely amazing. Which also brings me to the next modern day lament, but also a thing that I've always wondered, said on the show a few times, with the proliferation, and now we're 20 years into online shooters, right? Into, games like Call of Duty and, the military shooters, Call of Duty and Battlefield and stuff like that. Where is the G.I. Joe game? Now, we've had G.I. Joe video games. I get it. Don't come at me with that. I'm not, that I'm aware of. But I'm talking in the real, like, online COD Battlefield style shooter world. Where is either A, a straight up G.I. Joe game, or B, a la Fortnite. I know they're working Snake Eyes into Fortnite, but a la Fortnite, where's the G.I. Joe skin expansion for one of these games? Just sell a whole bunch of expansion packs that gives you G.I. Joe skins, G.I. Joe versus Cobra. I want answers, and I want this to happen. And I say this because the reason I was thinking about this today is because they just announced for Call of Duty Warzone, that free-to-play Call of Duty game, they're bringing in Rambo, and most excitingly for me, for this young boy, John McClane. I guess there's going to be a Nakatomi Plaza level map, right? So in a world where all these properties are franchising out, where's the G.I. Joe stuff? And I know maybe it's because it's real bullets and all that stuff, but there have been plenty of laser shooters over the years. So we can cross that bridge. I want a real-time Joe versus Cobra shooter, maybe very much like Star Wars Battlefront would be a cool kind of thing, where you have all these different classes and you could be different levels of Joe Green shirts, and and then as you earn points in the game, if you guys ever played this current Star Wars Battlefront, it just takes a few kills, and then you earn, next time you then spawn as a hero. You can spawn as Leia or as Roadblock or something like that. Or, Leia or Luke. Or that'd be amazing if you spawned as Roadblock in a Star Wars game. I'd be there for that. But you know what I mean? You spawn as Leia or Luke or Han or whatever that's appropriate to the level of fighting. So, maybe everyone spawns as like, you all start with your Battleforce 2000s of the world, right? So you can choose from them just to start with. But if you get enough points, then you can graduate to a Mutt, or then you can graduate to a Snake Eyes or a Scarlet, that kind of thing. That seems to me, to this casual gamer, but casual, I mean, working in the industry gamer, that seems to me an absolute no-brainer. And I don't understand why it's not being done, or why it hasn't been done. It's been 20 years. Like, there's not even like, oh yeah, I remember that one time they did it in 2014 and it never sold. It's never been done. I know that people have done, what do you call PC mods? They've done mods for them for certain games. I think one of the big games is Rainbow Six Siege, where they mod it out, and so you can play Rainbow Six Siege and looking like looking like the Joes, with full on, like you look like Beachhead and Leatherneck, and you storm, but you're just playing Rainbow Six Siege, which is great, and I appreciate that. But why do we have to rely on the mod community for this? Hasbro, step up your digital game is what I'm saying. And one more thing, is a G.I. Joe podcast the week of 5/18, the year of our Lord 2021. The Snake Eyes trailer dropped. Now, I don't do a lot of like trailer talk in the show, and I am optimistic for the Snake Eyes movie. I'm not beholden to the I feel I've said this before too. I'm not beholden to the source materials, but I am beholden to kind of the spirit of the character. So he doesn't need to be, a military guy who comes home to see his family murdered. Like I'm kind of okay with that. But I feel like he needs a little bit of that personal tragedy. And I feel like, to compel him, and I feel like his face needs to be banged up in such a way that he can't speak. Those are kind of the, and then you kind of have to do the whole murdered uncle, Hardmaster thing in order to build the rivalry. Like those are the three beats that I kind of feel I need. Silent because he's been damaged and his face is blowed up. Little personal tragedy to propel him. And the Hardmaster to propel the Storm Shadow relationship. Maybe, I say I'm not beholden to the history of it, but maybe that's nitpicky. I feel like that's a fair assessment of who he is as a character, right? All the other details, saving Scarlet, getting a blast in the face, that stuff can all change. I'm fine with that. So I come at this, it's kind of a teaser trailer. It looks good. The action looks good. It looks a little generic for my taste. That's my fear, is that it just looks a little generic. That's all. I'm not gonna cry about it. I'm not gonna complain about it. I'm genuinely not complaining about it. It does just look a little generic. I hope the movie is not that. I hope the movie has got a lot of real G.I. Joe-ness to it, because that's what I think we want out of our G.I. Joe movies. I think that's one of the failures of those first two movies, is that they were both generic and in very much the same style. So everyone looked like Snake Eyes in the first one. And then in the second one, it was just very generic. Like that could have been any action team named Roadblock and named, what I mean? There wasn't anything really that defined it about being either G.I. Joe. And then the one where you had more of a definition of who G.I. Joe was, they just all looked like Snake Eyes. So there's this fear that I have that that's going to be the case here. And that's the only thing I hope doesn't happen. Very quick trailer. So not down on it at all. Let me be very clear on that. Not down on it at all. Just my hope is that the spirit of Joe, the spirit of, character comes through in this. And I know it's just a Snake Eyes movie, so that's really all, but you guys know where I'm going with that. So, but it's exciting. There's a trailer dropped for a nationwide movie just called Snake Eyes, and it's not the Brian De Palma movie. Nicolas Cage doesn't have his fingers on it, guys. That's dope. That is crazy huge that there's that's exciting. So I can't wait for another trailer to kind of get into the story. This is not considered a story trailer. This is more of a character, kind of a theme, little bit of, I would consider this even really very much a bit of a teaser trailer, even though teasers are more like a little more cryptic than this, but this is definitely not a story trailer, so we don't know exactly what the story is. But yeah, Snake Eyes trailer. That's just we're getting closer. We are getting closer every day. And yeah, I'm hoping to do something with around the Snake Eyes movie when it drops July 23rd, 10 days after my birthday. But I am hoping to do something fun. So We'll hopefully we'll be able to announce that stuff as we get into like late June. So we'll see on that. So with all that aside, guys, none of that 13 minutes of palavering would be possible without these great sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Penseriga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. And we're back, and they're fabulous. And now we get to our segment that everybody loves. Everybody's talking about it.
You were saying?
We're checking out all the other comic books that were on the rack of the month. That G.I. Joe number 81 hit the stands. Now, Avengers 298 with Alfred knocking out a giant robot. I forget what robot. That's not Cobalt Blue, is it? But it's Alfred. He's carrying his cane. He's fresh out of the hospital after being beaten up maybe 10 issues back or so by the Masters of Evil. We're gearing up towards 300 was a complete revamp of the team, and Walter Simonson came on board. Woo! I don't know. Did he write this one? Was he writing this yet? I don't think he was. Yeah, no, he was. There he is. Walter Simonson. There he wrote this. So Simonson's leading up to a complete revamp of the team, and really a real solid revamp that would happen in 300. We're talking Mr. and Mrs. Fantastic. Well, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Sorry. Gilgamesh, the Forgotten One, which is like so forgotten. Who? And who else? I think was Cersei on that. Well, we'll see when we get there. But Simonson's on board, and it's an Inferno crossover, which was the Haps going on in the X-Men books at the time. Let's see. So G.I. Joe number 81 is there. Now we are done with the bi-weekly books. So G.I. Joe's back to a normal schedule. And I'm going to take this opportunity then to pause on the movies. So we're going to try to get the movies synchronized up with the comic books. So it'll be a couple months of no movies, no movies with.
You were saying?
And then we'll synchronize back up. Here we go. Speaking of Simonson, Havoc and Wolverine Meltdown number 1 and 2, written by Walter Simonson, pencils by John J. Muth. Walter and Louise Simonson wrote it. This is it's one of the early fully painted comic projects, really, but it was also like Dark Knight format, deluxe format, 4-issue. That's interesting. 2 came out this month. I'll bet you 2 come out the next month too. And it was Wolverine and Havoc going to, if I remember correctly, they go to Cuba, and it's a really smart book. It doesn't get a lot of the love I think that it probably deserves. It's not a flashy book. The colors are painted and they're very pretty, but they're really muted, and they don't pop. Like, I feel like this project what is this, 88? This project 5 years later, which catches some of that Alex Ross painted heat, when people were looking for painted books. I feel like this project gets received much better, and it's just a bigger deal. But if you've never read it, Havoc and Wolverine Meltdown is really pretty cool. It's pretty easy to get your hands on copies. It's not reprinted a lot. They have reprinted it, but it's not a super popular book on the trade paperback collection. Marvel Comics presents number 8 and 9. That series was my introduction to many of the secondary Marvel characters, like in a real way. It's a really great book for that. You had it was the first time I ever read about Shang-Chi, and I was really new into the Marvel universe at the time. So to me, I thought like Shang-Chi was like an A-list regular recurring character. Certainly the first time I read about Man-Thing, Cloak and Dagger, like there was a lot of firsts for me that came out of Marvel Comics Presents. I don't understand why anthologies don't sell better. They don't sell well as comics. They don't do well as movies. There is something about it that is so appealing to me, and yet so not great selling or screening, or however you want to call it. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is about doing an anthology, because, and I know, I guess I know it, because any reader buyer goes in knowing that it's going to be hit or miss. There's 4 stories in here. Like, for example, I don't love Man-Thing. So this is my first experience with him. I don't like swamp muck monsters. I didn't know that at the time, but I do now. So like if I'm picking this up off the shelf, I know 1/4 of this book I'm not going to be a fan of just because I don't like the character of Man-Thing. So I guess maybe I'm answering my question right there, is that when you spray to all fields, you're immediately going to, you're going to strike out at least, with one segment of the audience somewhere along the way. Maybe that's what it is, but I don't know. It's always boggled my mind because I enjoy anthology stories. I enjoy anthology movies. I like it. I like short stories. Those are always really good. So maybe the answer is you get an anthology book by the same author and the same creative teams on very similar subjects. Like one guy writes it, maybe 2 or 3 people draw it, but they do like 5 or 6 stories about just X-Men, and in one issue. Maybe that's how you get like a successful anthology story, which is kind of like what X-Men Unlimited was for a while. I mean, they lasted 40 some issues and then another run of like 20 some issues. So I don't know. Anyway, moving on. We got Punisher is in full force. He's got a trade this month. Punisher War Journal #2. So they didn't wait. And I know, so last month would have been Punisher War Journal #1. So his regular series was barely a year. Well, you know what? When they commissioned it, it wouldn't have even been a year old. His regular ongoing series sales were so strong they commissioned a second book before he even got to the first year. That's wild. That is completely wild. Silver Surfer Volume 4, #1. This is the Stan Lee Mobius Silver Surfer. It's a 2-issue miniseries put out by Marvel's Epic imprint. If you've never read it, it's gorgeous. And I'm talking about Jean Gerard Mobius. It's really, really beautiful. Marvel put out an oversized hardcover collection maybe 2 years ago. I feel like it was pre-pandemic. I don't think it came out last year. And it collected this. It's great. It's really, really great. If you've never seen it, check it out. The back issues, strangely, are starting to go up a little bit just because, as Mobius, obviously Mobius is amazing. And now with Stan passed away, I think the combination of both have put this in high regard. But I believe they made 1 billion copies of this book because it was available very, very cheaply for almost 30 years. So I don't think it's terribly difficult to get your hands on the original issues. However, this new reprint is really, really great. All right. And we've also got, X-Men 239. Inferno is starting. Got Mr. Sinister on the cover, doing everything he can to look like a Dark Phoenix version of Colossus. And as a new X-Men reader at the time, boy, was I confused. Because I was just learning who Colossus was, and then they introduced Mr. Sinister, who absolutely looked like a Dark Phoenix version. I don't know what Dark Phoenix was either, so, but he just looked like a bad guy version of Colossus. And I was like, is it his brother? Which, funnily enough, Colossus would turn out to have a bad brother, the astronaut, blah, 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 but I don't think they introduced him yet. What was his name? Anyway, he showed up a few times over the years. But this was my era. This 239 might have been like my first issue of X-Men because I started reading X-Men right at the Inferno crossover. So this would have absolutely been one of the early issues of X-Men that I read. I remember being really in love with Havoc as a character. So then that got me super excited to read that Havoc Wolverine miniseries. And then when I saw that it was written by the same people that created X-Factor, which was my jam, it was everything was coming up Joe at that time. Wolverine #2 is on the stands. It's Wolverine versus Silver Samurai. Let's just all pretend that battle in the movie never happened. All right.
You were saying?
Now we're moving on to DC comic books. Action Comics Weekly continues with 4 issues featuring the evergreen bestsellers of Speedy, The Phantom Stranger, The Secret Six, and Superman Lifting an Elephant. Boy, if you're looking to move comics, put them on your cover. On your cover. Adventures of Superman number 448. I think this was the first introduction of Dr. Wasn't this the introduction of Dr. No, I'm thinking of something else. I apologize. But this issue, I remember, was one of my early Superman issues, and I believe I bought it in a mall in Canada. That's all I'm going to say. For the rest of that story, you have to subscribe to my other podcast, Joe on Canada. Batman 426. This was big, guys. This was the big month. This was Death of the Family. So 426 had the, let me think here. 426 427 had the telephone number in it, and then 428 was Dead Robin. Yep, I believe that's the case. So 426, 427, 428 are on the stands this month, and 427 had the "Do you want to kill Robin?" and 428 the answer, not resounding though. By all accounts, when interviewed on this, all the people involved said it was a very, very close margin. However, they did say that they think DC staffers jammed the lines to kill Robin. So it wasn't a blowout. If you ever read there was a blowout, from what everything I've read about that, its point in time is it was not a blowout at all. It was a very close national call-in line. This was the 800 or 900 number. Cosmic Odyssey #1. This is written by Jim Starlin, ye of Thanos fame, and pencils and art by Mike Mignola. Wonderful. And Jose Marzan Jr., I believe, did the inks. Pat Olaf did the colorings, I think. And that's important because the coloring is, coloring is always important, but the coloring in this book is really, really phenomenal, especially when you're doing a story in space. There's so much like black work and ink work that using a good use of colors can make it pop and not make the book feel too heavy. Cosmic Odyssey, as the anti-life equation gets unleashed, and this was when the anti-life equation was not really well defined. It's still not. I mean, it still can very often be whatever the writer wants it to be, but Kirby had not really defined that with the Darkseid stuff. So Starlin makes it feel like they're like these shadow demons, so to speak. I guess the best way to do it. And they go all over the universe and Darkseid wreaking havoc and stuff like that. Gorgeous art by young Mike Mignola. His art style would refine and get tighter, and some probably would say better over the years, but it's still really good. And the big important thing that came out of this miniseries is this is the one where they had Jon Stewart fail at saving the planet Xanshi, which they would later say was a planet full of cannibals, which then made it somehow better. Like, it was not as terrible that planet blew up because these, like, they ate, like, you're judging this other civilization. It's okay for them to, anyway. So, but Cosmic Odyssey is good. It is really good, especially with the resurgence of Jim Starlin love with Thanos over at Marvel. If you guys never read Cosmic Odyssey, you really should check it out. What else we got here? Oh, and here we go. The other big crossover. It's crazy. These two big event stories. Goes to show you that there wasn't as much coordination going on. So Cosmic Odyssey would be considered a big event story. It really would. It's got the Justice League, Batman, Superman, Green Lantern. It's got everybody involved. It's 4-issue, high profile. Starlin was a big creator at the time. Mignola was an up-and-comer at the time. And you would think that would catch all the attention, but the same month they launched Invasion. And this was where all of the, led by the Dominators, the Kuns, and the Thangarians all attacked Earth, and the goal was to take over Earth. And I think the prevailing wisdom by them was all the superheroes and all the big stuff that's coming out of the Earth is going to eventually threaten their dominions. So we need to go to Earth and preemptively do it. And this was the cool thing about this was they cast the Thangarians as bad guys, which, while we'd met a lot of Thangarians in the past, and I think there may have been some like Silver Age Ron Thangarian issues. I know recently there's a lot of Ron Thangarian issues, but the Thangarians were Hawkman, right? It was where we got Hawkman. So it was like, well, what? Having them just be a race of bad guys, a race of people that are okay with taking over the Earth was crazy. And it was great. They destroyed Australia. No offense to our Australian listeners and friends. Or was it just Sydney? I thought it was, maybe it was they took over Australia and like destroyed Sydney or something like that. It was great. It was a really cool war comic, and it was, penciled primarily by Todd McFarlane, although I don't think he finished the series. I do think that Giffen steps in on part 2, and I feel like Giffen finished out part 3. But Invasion was very cool, and for a long time it was very much the forgotten crossover, because it was only 3 issues, but it had a lot of impact. It impacted just a ton of books. It had big crossovers in the Justice League and everything. Speaking of Giffen, Legion of Superheroes number 54, Wildfire, Ultra Boy, and Dawnstar on the cover, and this is partially the debut of that new Giffen style that would roll into the 5 year later of this real blocky, kind of streamlined but very heavy shadowed, square jawed everybody look. I love it. I absolutely love it. I know it turns some people off. I think it's fabulous. He would go a little too far, I think, when he got to like his trencher style, but then he would be able to pull it back. And this Legion style is just really, really gorgeous. Let's see, what else do we got here? Well, I think that's it, man. I'm rambling on. I'm going on and on and on. I think that's it. That seems to be it for
You were saying?
And now we're going to get into what you came for, G.I. Joe number 81.
Now, mass is ready.
Cover by the legendary Marshall Rogers, and looks like Bob McLeod on the inks. And we've talked a lot about Marshall Rogers on this show. He draws these guys very much like they are action figures come to life. Lots of thin lines, and thin lines and bright open like he doesn't do a ton of shadowing or shading on the body, so that all of the figures are very visibly seen. It's almost like there are little spotlights on all the characters in most of these panels, which is, how you look at a toy that doesn't have clothing that wrinkles, you can always pretty much see most of the toy, right? Like that, it's that kind of aesthetic. And I think his work is great and really suited for that, of making them feel like toys. We got on the cover here with a white background, which is a little boring, but it works because there's a lot of action going on. Battleforce 2000 versus Dreadnoks. And it's Thrasher going at it with trying to throw a trench knife at one of the Battleforce 2000 guys. Now, here's the deal. There's a lot of Battleforce names in here. I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect on them. I believe who he's going at is Dodger. I think he's attacking Dodger with this. But as we go through, if I make a couple mistakes, Dave Amiot, don't be too mean, all right? Don't be too mean when you text me after this episode. That's all I'm saying.
Yo, Joe!
So, plots and tracts. Larry Hama on the script, Marshall Rogers pencils, Randy Emberlin inks, Rick Parker lettering, Bob Sharon color, Bobby Chase editor, and Tom DeFalco editor-in-chief. So we open up in Maryland in what would be kind of a tried and true. There's a lot of staples to G.I. Joe in this book, which is opening up in a G.I. Joe training exercise. And in this case, it's Battleforce 2000. And it's Dodger, and he's trying to get an angle on a HISS tank that's attacking him. We don't know it's a training session yet. And there's a Mamba overhead, and all the Battleforce 2000, we see a couple of the vehicles, they're out and in full force. So they're getting attacked. We don't technically know that it's training.
Yo, Joe!
But we sort of still don't know that it's training, because there's smoke fully coming from this Mamba, and the Sky Sweeper is trying to hit him, but it's shooting a laser. And this is the first hint that we know that it's not real, because you could see on the Sky Sweeper is that it's saying poofed and bzat, and the red light is not seemingly coming from the guns. It's actually coming from like a weird spot. Like it looks as if, someone made a mistake. The gun's not actually firing that laser. But in actuality, this is really, really clever. It is firing from not where the actual guns the turret, like the nozzles, the barrels on the guns would be pointing. So this is actually really smart. I like it a lot. We get a overhead shot of the battlefield a little bit. We see that there's a trench dug in. Everyone trying to kind of jockey for position. And but we see there's a fair amount of smoke on the field. So this could still be happening.
Yo, Joe!
Now we get one of our first tips. It says, I just zapped the hiss that took out the Skysweeper. Blocker you and Dodger flank that other hiss. And there's more lasers happening. And if you look very closely, you see that on top of their traditional cannons on these guns, there's this similar looking laser. And that's the same laser that was drawn on the previous page on the Skysweeper's gun. So the attention to detail on this is an absolute A+. They're not just like, hey, just draw lasers coming out of the regular cannons. They're taking, Larry and Marshall are taking the time to actually draw these, these laser tag lasers. And the things they're shooting are, like smoke emitters on these hiss tanks. And by the time you get to the bottom of the page, we see that it's not a Cobra soldier that's crawling out of the hiss tank, hiss number 375. It looks from behind, by all appearances, to be Duke.
Yo, Joe!
And it is. But Duke's got he's busting their chops a little bit, and it turns out Roadblock was in one of the other ones, and Lift Ticket was flying that Mamba, and the three veterans are really giving it to him. In fact, I'm gonna step back and editorialize a little bit here. I feel like it's common knowledge that like Larry wasn't a big fan of Battleforce 2000. I believe he kills them off later. We haven't gotten their spoiler alert, but I believe that's what happened. And I think he said like in interviews that he wasn't. So if I'm making this up, I apologize, but I swear I've heard this like directly. Like that was a specific thing he didn't like, which is hilarious because they look like chumps in this episode. Like they're not very competent in this comic book. They get yelled at by the veterans on the team here. And then later on it's just a high speed, ridiculous chase on the highway. So if this is his way of saying, I'm going to make these guys look like complete fools because I'm not a fan of writing them, he absolutely succeeded. And speaking of looking like fools, who is this? Hold on. Knockdown. Knockdown's helmet is terrible. Now, Marshall is drawing it absolutely accurately to what the toy was. But Knockdown is not great. Again, this Battleforce 2000, I'm biased too. They were one of the things that when I started seeing them show up on the racks, they made it much easier for me to back away and stop collecting G.I. Joe because I was not a big fan. His gun is massive, way too big. And that helmet is hot messy. Like it's a hot mess. I feel like sci-fi was the biggest level of future looking tech that we were ready for at the time. But this absolutely accurate drawing of Knockdown proves why I am not into this. Although this is kind of neat. Although, you know what? Okay, so I was about to say that red light on his helmet, I was going to give them credit to say like that was some of the laser tag stuff. No, that's on his real helmet. That's a part of his actual toy. So I can't even put it that way. Anyway, they is a brief introduction to the team. To be fair, they don't do it's not terrible. It's certainly not terrible, but with the number of guys, usually something like this, there's usually a bigger emphasis on really saying, blocker, dodger, what was it? Knockdown, like really getting into the names of the guys. It's not as spelled out here. It takes a little bit to kind of dig in and figure out who all these guys are if you're not super familiar with the exact names of the Battleforce 2000 scene. But the training is over, and we get a little teaser that the Dreadnoks are spotted in the area, which, of course, followed from last issue where they took a chainsaw to a junkyard.
Yo, Joe!
Before we go any further, you guys could have purchased in 1988 an Airwolf real engine-powered model helicopter that you could fly. Why was there an Airwolf helicopter you could fly? and not a dragonfly. That's all I'm saying. So up on the hill overlooking all this, we've got Mutt and Doc. And again, they don't really say that's Rumbler. They don't get to Rumbler, though, until like the third panel. But it's Rumbler, Doc, and Mutt with a healing junkyard hanging up on the field, kind of watching everything. And you see, basically, Mutt is very, very, very angry. And still, he's bearing a grudge against these Dreadnoks. And that makes total sense. What I really like about this is Larry took absolutely a great one-and-done storyline, which was last issue. Absolutely was one and done. And sure, you follow up that they're hurt and all that stuff. But he's turning it into just the continuing soap opera of the Dreadnoks in Jersey getting into trouble and you know, doing their schemes and stuff. And so without knowing it, it's a continuation. But this is completely also self-contained. Not as much when you get to the end, but for the most part, this is a self-contained adventure. And Mutt overhears them talking about the Dreadnoks.
Yo, Joe!
And now there's a Gunsmoke Nintendo game cartridge ad here. And that guy in the Gunsmoke thing always looked like a cross between like John Wayne and Roadhouse. What's his name from Roadhouse? But really looks just like John Wayne. And I don't think they ever got his license rights. So elsewhere, we're over here at Broca Beach. And the Dreadnoks are taking out... they're at a shooting gallery. And they're taking out their armament aggressions on life-size cutouts of the G.I. Joe team. I'm a sucker for the life-size cutout target practice. They've been doing this since the early issues of G.I. Joe. In this case, we've got it's Buzzer shooting at Chuckles and Duke and Outback and
Yo, Joe!
That was a preemptive Yo Joe. I hit the wrong button there. Shockwave. Shockwave's the guy, I always forget his name, but I absolutely freaking love him. I think he's a great design. He's the SWAT guy. I think he's awesome. But his name, a lot of these, this is right that era, that right when I was just over the crest of my being into collecting the toys. But I adore the Shockwave figure. I think he's great. I think he's really, really nice. He's probably one of my favorites that I never had. I think I talked about him, Hit and Run recently in the same regard. But as they're screwing around there, Zorana and Thrasher pull up on the ATV on the Ferret, and they're like, "Come on, guys, we got a big night." There's some. Remember those investors that Zorana and Xandar were going to talk to last issue that seemed to be kind of a throwaway gag? Not a throwaway gag.
Yo, Joe!
So meanwhile, back at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, I love that the Battleforce 2000 vehicles just drive around the street too. That was the point. Like the G.I. Joe vehicles, at least were for the most, I mean, not the heavily armed stuff, and not really, but they were really based on like real vehicles. You know, your Jeeps and your Ostrikers and things like that. But the Battleforce 2000 vehicles are absolutely not based on anything. So the concept of them driving around the highway, especially laden with all these missiles, is brilliantly hilarious and brilliantly ridiculous. This is great. So we get someone asking about how Junkyard is, how Mutt's dog is. And this is great reminder for the reader to fill them in case they didn't read the issue, which we did have a couple editor notes 2 pages back to say, go read issue 76 and go read issue 79 if you want to find out more about, you know, what they're referencing. So in this case, he says he's healing up fine, Blocker. And Mutt joins the Battleforce 2000 team. Now, why they let him on when he just has a normal helmet? Like Mutt's helmet is not outlandish and garish like any of the Battleforce 2000. I feel like they would have been a little more snooty about it. They would have been like, hey man, you can't ride with us unless your helmet makes you look like a doofus. But they did. They let him on. And it's funny because Mutt keeps saying like, no, I don't have anything to prove against these Dreadnoks. By the way, here's a complete map that I've already marked out where we're going to catch these guys and pummel them into oblivion.
Yo, Joe!
I don't think he was fooling anybody. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, we go to that seminar, and they're here to swindle all these people out of their real estate, right? And just in the middle of the lobby, Zorana unstrips, which is absolutely hilarious. And we show what's great about this scene is that they're showing that Zorana really is the brains of the operation. She's really got it together, and Zartan always has had it together. So it runs in the family. They're not dopes. The Dreadnoks are complete morons. They're not led by morons. And, she points out that we're going to need even more funds to convert the newly incorporated village of Broca Beach to Cobra's purposes. So now we know that now Cobra has taken over the new village of Broca Beach. And isn't it amazing how people are willing to believe they can get something for nothing? And Torch is like, well, they can't? Not legally. Oh, So they get on this. In this final panel in the shadows, driving in the night, it's a really nice panel. The sun setting. Deep shadows on these guys. The headlights on their motorcycles are breaking through. It's funny, the Ferret not driving with lights on. Thrasher, danger. And Zanzibar flying, no lights on Zanzibar. That feels dangerous. But the drawing itself is really, really nice. It's the bottom third of a page.
Yo, Joe!
And while we're at it, let me point out the colors in this. This book really pops. Going back to, let's see who Bob Sharon color, Bob's done a lot of the coloring on this book, and the colors are always really great, but this one, he's using a lot of pastels and just a lot of complementary colors. We're getting a lot of greens and pinks and oranges and reds and colors that you don't normally associate, I think, with G.I. Joe. This issue is really, really vibrant in that regard. I would have loved to have seen this issue, and you know what it is? It's complementing Zorana, and I think that's the kind of the unifying element here. I would have loved to have seen, and you know what? Also, it makes sense because the Battleforce 2000 guys, while they're primarily kind of white and blue, white and black, color scheme, they seem their individual uniforms tend to have a lot of different varying colors. So this one really stands out to me. This is really nice. And in this shot here on this page, there's it's not a cruise liner, but like a freighter that's heading towards the Jersey Shore. And it's got these great pink clouds, and it's just really like bright sunny day, but we don't know what it is as a reader, but it's heading towards the shore. And on board, we see there's a lot of Cobra eels, some Cobra vipers of varying sorts. I'm not sure exactly what they are. I think they're techno vipers. And as they get closer, we see that this is playing out like Ellis Island is what Larry's doing with this. This is like a ship of refugees from Europe heading to America for the first time. And instead of seeing the Statue of Liberty, they see like the Ferris wheel of Broca Beach. You even get this little girl saying, "Are we going to have a real house here, Daddy?" And he says, "With a real yard and everything, just like it was back in Springfield." So that tells us that these guys are Springfield refugees. Because remember when Springfield was a fully functional town, and they all lit out. And I don't think they've ever said what happened to those people. Apparently, they've been living as refugees somewhere. Maybe on Cobra Island, probably not, because we've never really seen them. But like even the drawing of this woman up front in the babushka, there's another babushka in the back. They're leaning into this. These are refugees. These are Ellis Island immigrants here.
Yo, Joe!
Just with Cobra hearts. So now, because every great Dreadnok adventure needs... Oh, that's my dog. Sorry for that interruption. Shirley had something to say. Well, just like every great adventure with the Dreadnoks needs some kind of highway chase, we're about to get one here. So we get to the New Jersey Turnpike, so there's toll booths there, and we see the aftermath of the Dreadnoks already driving through. There's a whole lot of rollers, a whole lot of squad cars. One of the toll booths has been destroyed as I'm sure the Dreadnoks tore through it. And this Captain Coho, I'm not sure how that would be pronounced, Cohoe, Cohey, he's in charge of things, but they're all shoot first, ask question later. So when these weirdos pull up in these weirdo trucks like the Battleforce 2000 trucks, they don't trust them. So they've got copies of the orders, they've got the Army ID card, they've got a letter from the president, but the state troopers are very, very, very skittish. And when Mutt sees that, when he hears that it was attacked by dudes with a chainsaw, he confirms that the girl with pink hair with him. And they say they're waiting for the SWAT team to show up.
Yo, Joe!
Mutt tells Blocker to step on it, and they proceed to blow through the toll booth, and the cops start shooting at him. Now, a couple things about that I love is... Mutt needed verification that there was a pink-haired girl with him. It wasn't enough because there apparently are multiple bands of roving maniac bikers in New Jersey that are tear up the Jersey Shore. that the Joes are only interested in the ones that are definitely identified as Dreadnoks. If you were a different group of terrorist bikers at the time, you could have gotten away with it. Just don't dress like Zarana. And then I love that the cops just start shooting, even though they're verified. Yeah, we know these guys are soldiers, but we're still a little skittish. They just start shooting at the Joes as they take off. And so we get a high-speed, Burt Reynolds-esque, what was the director? Hal Needham-esque car chase between the cops and the G.I. Joe Battleforce 2000 team.
Yo, Joe!
And now we go back to Zarana, who, again, brains of the operation. She's yelling at Buzzer because he chainsawed that toll booth, and so they would have been fine, but he lost his cool and went right through the toll booth. Still, ferret, no headlights on. Just throwing that out there. And Zarana hitches a ride with Zanzibar because she has to go ahead and take care of the business with Broca Beach. So we know that the Dreadnoks are going to, what we know so far is the Dreadnoks are going to rendezvous with the immigrants that we saw a couple of pages back. And, she says, you better not mess up this time, Buzzer. Or you'll answer to Zartan. I like the close-up on this to show that she's serious about it. I think it's great. I think Zarana is well-deserved as a fan favorite. Let's put it that way.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, Bubble Yum wants us to show them our bubble. We needed to send them our zaniest Bubble Yum photo, and it could snap up some great prizes. You could have won a big screen TV, which probably realistically weighed 250 pounds. You could have won a camera. What were the little square cameras? There was a name for them. Like they didn't shoot on. They were called like snap cameras or something. So you could have won a camera. You could have won a stereo set with giant speakers, a nice rack system, or you could have won a shoulder-mounted video camera recorder. And there's nothing to scale here, so I'm not exactly sure how large it is. I'm assuming it's the size of a briefcase. But it's got a couple kids dressed as Frankenstein and the Mummy. Did anyone ever enter these Bubble Yum contests, things like this? We also get Marvel's Supermart, or Marvel's listing a bunch of retailers. And just real quick glance, it mentions in California, it doesn't mention Golden Apple, how dare they? But it does mention Jeffrey Patterson Comics. And that became Jeffrey's Comics, which was a fabulous store out here. He passed away maybe 5 years ago, but by all accounts, he was a good dude. And his store was always great to go to. I would pop in every once in a while. I was down in Torrance. I used to work in Torrance. So it's fun. It's Jeffrey Patterson. And he was offering his catalog for $1. Or if you wanted his Golden Age catalog, it would cost you $1.50, 50 cents more. But everyone offers their catalog here. Like you get over in Washington State, O'Leary's Books, $1.50 for a catalog. Interesting. So I wonder how many of these. That's the only one I recognize. But is Empire Comics still a thing in New York and Rochester? Is Dungeon Book and Comic Store in San Antonio, Texas still a thing? Like what's happening here? But if you wanted to place your ad, you'd contact Rita Smolinski at Marvel Comics in New York. Now, we go back to Knockdown in that terrible helmet. He's in the Skysweeper, and they're tracking Zanzibar. So they know that there's the Dreadnoks on foot or on wheels, so to speak, and then they know that there's something flying. So they want to track where the flying thing is going. They don't know that it's Zanzibar, but they know that there's kind of two things happening that they need to keep track of. Meanwhile, they're getting shot at by these local yokels straight out of Smokey and the Bandit.
Yo, Joe!
Some tear gas or just general smoke gets popped, and of course it's at a curve. So again, like every great like Blues Brothers police chase, you got to have the squad cars flying into ditches and jumping corners and things like that. And that's what happens here. That's what's fabulous about this. So all the squad cars, they miss the turn and they go flying. And what's great about the Joes is they're asking Dodger if they checked on the condition of those cops. And they said affirmative. The cops are angry, but they're unscathed. So they don't want the cops to be hurt. They just, Joe's got a job to do. Meanwhile, Mutt's ready for action.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, on the beach, under the cover of darkness, all the immigrants we're just calling them that, they're all coming off the boat, right? And they're all carrying these Cobra suitcases, not briefcases, but actually like luggage suitcases. Little kid saying, it's dark, Mommy, and it's much safer in the dark, Pumpkin. And behind them is a line of hiss tanks and maggots, and they're waiting for Zorana to show up. They're pretty exposed on the beach. The idea is they're doing this under the cover of night. Whatever they're doing, we don't know yet. They're doing it under the cover of night, so they need to get it done quickly.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, we could have ordered from Nickelodeon Double Dare t-shirts, backpacks, a Finders Keeper t-shirt, a Nickelodeon bicycle cap, and you could have gotten yourself a free yo-yo. This stuff was pretty cheap. Let's see, how much is this stuff? How much is this stuff? Well, the backpack was only $19.99. T-shirts, $10. Seems, that seems like a premium price at the time. I'm just going to throw that out there. Now, according to the Battleforce 2000 infrared, in a really great, nicely staged page, Battleforce is looking to the left, and using the infrared detector, they're seeing a whole bunch of Dreadnoks, and then there's a giant wham, because which is the Dreadnoks attacking the Joes, and in the wham is the picture of the Battleforce. So it's what the wham is happening to, right? So they're getting fired upon. So it's the sound effect is the panel, and the panel is laying on the victims of the attack, if you see where I'm getting at with that. It's a really cool choice. And then we cut to the bottom panel, which is now facing left, where the Dreadnoks are attacking, and you even get Thrasher breaking the plane. So that by his head breaking the plane on the middle panel, if you look closely, that's taking ownership of that shot visually. So they are doing the shooting. They're doing the whamming, so to speak, in that middle panel. It's cool. It's a simple laid out page, but it works really well with really kind of subtle choices. And one of the primary ones being Thrasher laying over it. You also get a cool broken panel on the right side, where the Dreadnought trike is shooting. That panel border is not fully closed, so it's breaking the border a little bit. It's pretty subtle and pretty cool.
Yo, Joe!
So now we just get some all-out action. And the next two pages, these next two pages are really neat. I would have loved to have seen these two side to side when they printed, because right now it's page 23 and 24, so it's an odd and even. So they're on opposite sides of each other. But if you look at the design of them, there's tiny boxes in the upper right and the lower left, and they feature little real close-ups on a Dreadnok or I think it's Buzzer, a Dreadnok and a Joe, and then these big I don't even know how to describe. They look almost like Tetris shapes, but they're inverted, same panel shape inverted. They're like it's like a rectangle laid on top of a triangle of the vehicles attacking each other, right?
Yo, Joe!
And then this next page is similar, but the perspective is flipped the other direction. So you've got the close-up of the Joe in the upper left and the close-up of the Dreadnok in the lower right. In this case, Thrasher, and the Joe looks like it's Mutt. So you could see, if you put those two pages together, if they had been laid out separately, so that 23 was on the left-hand side and 24 was on the right-hand side of a two-page spread, that would have looked dynamite. But there was an ad somewhere that threw off the rhythm of it, I'll bet. Because it's a really strange and cool design, and I'm here for it. And again, the big chunk panels show different actions on the battle, like on the the vehicular part of the battle even. It's cool. It's really neat, but I feel like it's broken up by not being face to face.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, Zanzibar and Zorana have reached Broca Beach, and they're talking to the immigrants, and we're finally getting an explanation of what's going on. She says, we've bought up the whole town, and renamed it Broca Beach. It's completely vacant and ready to occupy, and we need to get everybody inside and undercover as fast as possible. Tomorrow we'll sort out permanent residents. We just need to get you in. So it's kind of like squatters' rights is the plan here. They bought all this stuff out through these real estate scams. So now they have an empty town, and then they're just going to go in and squat. And so to most outside observers, it would be like nothing happened. Like there's still a vibrant town full of people. That's what they're moving in on. But in order to do it, no one can see them move.
Yo, Joe!
We got a Bullpen's Bulletin. Quote of the month: a vampire casts no reflection, nor can his image be captured on film. It's a minor obstacle to a career as a movie star. What? It's from Igor, Count Duckula, number 1. So now the Joes and the Dreadnoks are still fighting. They're just big, highway explosions and things like that. And it's funny that Zorana was counting. Well, someone in the previous page, they said, all we have to do is rely on the Dreadnoks to have enough sense to not lead the Joes to Broca Beach. She then says, what am I saying? They're Dreadnoks, and changes her tune and says, we have to get these people out of sight immediately. And sure enough, what are we getting in this issue? They're like, hey, let's go to Broca Beach. In other words, let's lead the Joes to Broca Beach, which is not what they want. It's completely the antithesis to what Cobra wants. And that's what's happening with Battleforce.
Yo, Joe!
Nice house ad for Inferno with that sweet Mark Silvestri art. And as the Dreadnoks roll into town, you can tell they're the Dreadnoks because they're on the motorcycles. The maggot, a Cobra maggot, is pulling into a garage. The garage door is closing. It's completely closed by the time the Battleforce vehicles show up. And we get a bunch of police vehicles also show up at the exact same time.
Yo, Joe!
This is one of the more abrupt endings here. Got a New Jersey police captain. You boys are in a world of trouble. Step out and put your hands in the air. As a blocker, he's holding up orders. They're copies and a letter from the president, thing he talked about earlier. That cop doesn't care. The sky in full view. This is where it gets a little. This is where I feel like that. Like this one, a couple issues ago too. This happened too, where it just ended so abruptly. I feel like they ran out of space on this one too, because in full, the cops have stopped them. They're in the middle of a residential town, and Zanzibar and Zorana are flying overhead in his skiff. The Joes shoot it down in front of the police. The skiff proceeds to crash land on the cop's car, throwing Zanzibar and I'm presuming Zorana too, throwing them off the skiff. You can barely see Zanzibar's legs. And it's awkward because it is like dark on dark. So they are there though. And then you get the cop scream. That's it. Slap in handcuffs. Everybody's under arrest, which is a great way to wrap it up. But it just goes so quick. Like it's boom, boom, boom. All right. Everybody's under arrest. That's great. So I'm hoping next issue, I'm hoping that we get, like Zanzibar and Zorana in jail with him. Maybe we do. I don't remember. I'm excited to get to it. G.I. Joe number 82. It teases it. It's called Next Issue: The Making of a Joe. And in the inside ad for this comic is an ad I'd seen a million times. It's from Ultra Games. Speaking of video games, and they're advertising 2 classics of the NES. One of them is Defender of the Crown, which I've never played, but I think it was considered pretty decent, like an RPG kind of a game. But it also talks. Ultra Games made Skate or Die, which was an absolute legend. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video games. I mean, that's huge. So we're getting ready about to get some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle video games. And on the back cover, we have a Candelicious snake eating a giant piece of Candelicious. Guys, that's it for Joe on Joe Illustrated G.I. Joe issue number 81. Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you agree? Do you disagree? Are you on board with the Snake Eyes film? Reach out, let me know. I'm on board with the Snake Eyes film. Don't get me wrong. I look forward to seeing a little bit. I look forward to seeing the story. I look forward to seeing the movie. Let's just get there. We just lock me up in cryo sleep, and we'll get there. But yeah, that's it for G.I. Joe number 81. The Dreadnoks once again taking center stage. Battleforce 2000. I don't think being very competent, but your opinions may vary. And now you, Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.